weren't perfect, we made mistakes. But we did what we said we would do, we kept our promises, and we got the big things right. We gave Canada the strongest economic and fiscal management during the global economic crisis, and since then, we reduced the federal tax burden to its lowest level as a share of our economy since the 1950s. In part because of that, we saw family incomes go up to their highest level in our history and in the developed world, and we saw poverty reduced to its lowest level in Canadian history, an achievement about which we didn't boast enough, I think, and made historic investments in infrastructure and healthcare, so we got our priorities right. And we did a lot more. I'm proud of what I think the principled foreign policy that we articulated, standing up for our democratic allies like Ukraine and Israel, and reinforcing our national security, and standing up for the West, giving our prairie farmers marketing freedom and so forth. Now in that 10 years, I served for several years, as was mentioned, as Minister of Immigration, and took on a huge challenge of reforming what had become a broken immigration system. Too many newcomers going to the 3 biggest cities in the country, facing unemployment and underemployment, rather than coming to areas that were facing skill and labor shortages like the West. So the first thing we did was to get a much better geographic distribution of immigrants across Canada, tripling immigration to the prairies, and doubling it here in Alberta to help us bring talented people here to fuel our prosperity during the boom years. At the same time, we cracked down on various forms of abuse of our generosity. Too many people were sneaking in through the back door, through human smuggling, human trafficking, fake asylum claims, fake immigration marriages, citizenship fraud, and the like, and nobody wanted to tackle it. So I went through all of those areas of fraud and basically locked the back door and said, if you want to come to Canada, we are an open and welcoming country. If you want to come and become Canadian, work hard and respect our rules, just please wait your time in the queue and come legally through the front door. That's how, by the way, you reinforce public support for immigration to avoid the kind of backlash that we see in Europe and the United States. For 2 years in the government, I served as Minister of Employment, where I focused on a skills agenda, encouraging young people, in particular, to go into the whole range of occupations, including skilled trades. I think for too long we've told young people that unless they go to university and pursue professional careers, that somehow they're selling themselves short. And I think that's a terrible lie. I think many young people have great talents to pursue in trades, for example, and benefit hugely from apprenticeship, vocational and technical training, which is why I created the Canada Apprenticeship Grant, a tax credit for employers who hire apprentices, the Canada Job Grant, the Tools Tax Credit, the Canada Apprenticeship Loan, and other programs that sent the message that a trade certificate has the same value as a university degree. They believe that in Germany, and I think we should in Canada too. Finally, I had the great honor in our government of serving last year as Minister of National Defense. Special honor for me because I come from a military family going back several generations. My dad was a jet fighter pilot in the Royal Canadian Air Force, and we remember and salute, by the way, all of our veterans as we approach Remembrance Week, particularly any of you who have served in our uniform. In that position, I deployed our military to the Middle East to participate in the international coalition combating this genocidal terrorist organization, the so-called Islamic State, and I deployed our military to Ukraine to train their people better to cope with the Russian invasion of their country. So 10 years of great experience. Oh, and all 10 years I was Minister of Multiculturalism, this was mentioned. That led to some humorous moments. I remember being at a NATO summit, hanging on a business card, and would say Minister of National Defense and Minister for Multiculturalism. I'm quite sure the only person ever in the world with that title. And the British, I'll never forget the British Defense Secretary looking at my card 3 or 4 times. Defense and multiculturalism, like you couldn't quite comprehend it. And I said, Minister, you'll have to understand, in Canada, the multiculturalism is more important to many people than the defense part. So, but in that position, I worked very closely with our ethnic immigrant and cultural communities, obviously on behalf of the government, but also on my weekends on behalf of the Conservative Party, to reach out, because I believe that most new Canadians have what are essentially conservative values. They believe in hard work, personal responsibility, entrepreneurship, respect law and order, our democratic values, but many were not voting that way. So I led a project which I'm proud to say effectively doubled the support for the Conservative Party amongst new Canadians. We became the only centre-right party in the world which won a larger share of votes from new Canadians than native-born citizens. And I'm terribly proud of that. It meant that in the last decade, I attended some 6,000 events in ethnic and cultural communities, which earned me the nickname in the cabinet as the Minister for Curry in a Hurry. Because I think my record was attending 4 curry banquets in one night in Surrey alone. And the Chinese community referred to me as the Smiling Buddha, because apparently there's some kind of a physical resemblance. But, I did add a couple of notches to the belt in all of those years of eating for my country and my party. And it was, and by the way, happy Diwali. Diwali Mubarak to anybody who's celebrating that tomorrow. Great time, but you know, all things come to an end, and voters down east decided to go in a different direction last October, which has meant I've spent a lot more time back here at home, which has been a blessing for me personally, but it has been a challenging time as well, because I have met so many people going through a time of real adversity in our province because of this recession. I have met grown men in their mid-career years who have broken down in tears in front of me because they've lost their job. I think of one fella, a Polish immigrant engineer here in Canada for 40 years, managed to get 3 successful patents to his name. Brilliant man. Laid off 18 months ago, and applied for hundreds of other positions and no callbacks. He's run out of severance and running out of cash and credit and about to lose his home. Embarrassed, ashamed to face his family, I had to refer him to counseling. I have met countless people in similar circumstances, people who have owned small businesses into which they poured their life savings and worked 80 and 90 hours a week, who have lost those businesses. People who got through the NEP 35 years ago, but are not getting through the NDP today. You know, think about Riley and McCormick on 8th Avenue, established in 1911, Western Wear Store downtown. They got through 2 world wars, the Great Depression, the NEP, but they couldn't get through this recession. They just closed their doors. I think of a young man I met in Hardisty, Alberta. Now, Hardisty, you don't get much more Alberta than that. That's where the pipeline started. I was filling up my gas tank in my pickup at the Esso station there. And another truck pickup pulls up behind me, splattered in mud, and a young fellow jumps out, rushes up to me, and says, "Hey, you're that Kenney guy, right?" Oh. I said, "Yeah." He says, I don't know what was coming next. He was very, I don't know if he was going to slug me or something. He says, I was a bit hesitant to admit I was Jason Kenney. He says, "How long is it going to take for you to get rid of the NDP up in Edmonton?" And I said, "Well, probably about 3 years." He says, "Well, how come you can't do it faster?" I said, "Look, I'm going as fast as I can, but they choose the election timing, not me." And he said, "Sir, this is important, because my dad lost his job in the oil field over a year ago, can't find any other work, and he's getting depressed, and I'm worried about him. I've never seen him like this before." And he says, "And I'm just 17. Which shocked me, because he looked like he was 10 years older than that. He says, "I'm 17, and I'm taking care of the whole family. I'm the only paycheck for both of my parents and all 4 of my brothers and sisters, and the pressure and the stress is getting to me too." I think about that young man every day, because his story for me symbolizes the experience of tens or hundreds of thousands of other Albertans right now. Nearly 100,000 of whom have lost full-time jobs in the past 16 months. Near record levels of insolvencies and bankruptcies. Average family incomes down, and these numbers are obscured by the fact that we have so many self-employed contractors who show up as being employed, but have lost 70, 80, or 90% of their income. There is real pain, and I fear it may get worse before it gets better. Now listen, that young 17-year-old, like most of us Albertans, we are a lot more sophisticated than people give us credit for. We understand that commodity prices go up and down, they're out of our control. We've been through downturns before. We are resilient and innovative, we get through these things. What we don't understand is a government that seems determined to make a bad situation much worse than it needs to be, by slamming on the brakes in the midst of a recession. One of the worst recessions in our history, and yet they are applying what economists would call counter-cyclical policies right now. I don't mean pro-growth policies, they're deepening the cycle through higher taxes and higher regulation. They're going after higher taxes on everything, higher business taxes, higher income taxes, higher provincial share of property taxes. They're helping Mr. Trudeau double the CPT payroll tax that will make it more expensive to hire people but will not help today's seniors. And now they are about to impose the single largest tax increase in Alberta history, the multi-billion-dollar carbon tax, that was not even mentioned in the last election campaign, and which will make it more expensive to do everything. From filling up your gas tank, heating your home, to buying your groceries, to running a small business or a farm, to running your school buses as a school board, or a charity or a nonprofit. Costs that will cascade down through the economy to the end users, and which will hurt and cost the lowest income and the poorest amongst us the most. And which will be imposed on an economy with carbon-intensive industries where none of our competitor jurisdictions are doing the same thing. It will hamper and handicap our core industries in a way that none of our competitors are doing. And that's on top of massive new regulations, the shutting down thousands of hectares of managed forest area that will kill thousands of forestry jobs, shutting down the coal industry that will get ghost towns out of Grand Cache and Hanna and other communities, and will result in a huge increase in electricity prices, which will make it more difficult to diversify our economy. Billions of dollars of capital have fled because of these decisions, and because of investor uncertainty that has been created. They have, through the unnecessary royalty review, the politicized lawsuit against the power producers, which has undermined the good faith and credit of the government of Alberta. One example, ExxonMobil canceled $6 billion in planned investment in the oil sands and redeployed almost the same amount of capital to Kazakhstan. I never thought I would see the day when the former Soviet Socialist Republic of Kazakhstan was regarded as a safer investment environment than the province of Alberta. But that's where we are. Now, I've observed all of this, the human cost, the economic statistics, and I've said something has to be done about this, because this is what they have managed to do in just 16 months. And imagine what they could do if they got 8 or 9 years in the second term. I think the damage would be catastrophic and in many ways irreversible. Not just to the structure of our economy, but to our political culture. I mentioned before, I grew up in Saskatchewan. Let me tell you a little story about Saskatchewan. In 1944, Tommy Douglas was elected, the CCF was elected in Saskatchewan. They started fiddling with the royalties, they raised corporate taxes, they started expropriating businesses, they created an anti-investment. Does that sound familiar? The population of Saskatchewan then was 1 million people, by the way. And the population of Alberta was 500,000. Fast forward 6 decades. The population of Saskatchewan, after they did those things in 1944, the headquarters of the oil and gas industry had been in Regina then. You probably didn't know this. They all picked up and they moved here to Calgary. And for 6 decades, capital, investors, entrepreneurs, hard workers, talented young people moved westward as well. And 6 decades later, Saskatchewan still had a population of 1 million, and Alberta had a population of 4 million. Policy matters. Political choices have consequences. But in Saskatchewan, they finally figured it out. About 13 years ago, they brought together a coalition of free enterprisers to stop the vote splitting. They created something called the Saskatchewan Party that has gone on to win 3 elections for the first time since the CCF came to office. They've won 3 elections as a free enterprise government, with on average 65%